What are the NickToons? It's a question with such an obvious answer, isn't it? They're wild, adventurous series that tend to appeal to children's senses of humour and excitement. They've been that for a while now, it's the backbone of their identity. But how strange is it that it all began so different? There was a time where that question still needed an answer, and one show stood up to the plate and set the standard for everything. It didn't really. Or did it?
That's me. Hey!
Doug has a tall order to live up to, introducing the world to the idea of Nickelodeon producing their own cartoons. And while yes, it still has its fans, it's also seen a lot of contemporary viewers who find it to be average and rather unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Even most Nick historians see it more as a nostalgic artifact than a great, timeless cartoon. I'm not here to change that. I'd say some of these sentiments are deserved, but is there anything at all that separates Doug from future Nicktoons in a good way? Something that was lost from the network when it ended? Our story begins in the mid-80s with a cartoonist called Jim Jenkins. He'd worked behind the scenes with Nickelodeon before on some of their very first shows, notably Hocus Pocus and Pinwheel, the one that started it all. After working on those, but before moving on to smaller projects like Station IDs, he found himself in a funk after a divorce and a biking accident in the same year. So to keep himself busy and optimistic, he started drawing stories in his sketchbook about a little kid called Brian. But he later changed the name to Doug. His lifelong friend, David Campbell, helped him flesh out this world for Doug to live in based on Jenkins' childhood in Virginia, and as the 80s went on, he became more interested in getting this Doug character out there. He appeared in bumpers for Florida grapefruit growers and the USA Network, along with his dog Porkchop, and even thought of putting him in a children's book, where Doug gets a new pair of shoes. I've done 2 shows in a row now that began life as book pitches. That can't be a coincidence. But Nickelodeon soon came calling again, looking for cartoonists with fresh ideas for their upcoming animation project, the NickToons. Jim would not only get his own production company, Jumbo Pictures, but a full series of this new pilot for a Doug TV show, Doug Can't Dance, performed well with test audiences. It did, and by the end of 1990, Doug had become a TV show, with that pilot, along with Doug Gets Busted, premiering on August 11th, 1991 as the very first Nicktoons. While Rugrats and the Ren and Stimpy show would premiere later on that warm Sunday morning, someone decided Doug should be the world's introduction to what Nickelodeon was capable of with their own original cartoons. But throughout its run, it would constantly be overshadowed by its more popular brethren, Ren and Stimpy immediately, and Rugrats with time and momentum. Ratings and reviews were good, parent groups predictably took less issue with it than the others, but it got cancelled prematurely at 4 seasons and 52 episodes. There was going to be a 5th, which would bring it up to 65, the magic number for syndication in case Nick ever had to do that, but they felt the series was getting too expensive. They said nay, and I said, what the fudge? How expensive was Doug to make? January 2nd, 1994 saw the last new Doug episodes for the network, but there was some compensation as the series did win the following 2 Kids' Choice Awards. Even 1995's, the one year in the whole decade it wasn't in production or airing new episodes. Let's get real, they were participation ribbons. In that way, Doug can be seen as the first millennial cartoon. The Doug story isn't over yet, but I should go ahead and talk about the Doug story.
Dear Seeger,
The Funnies have just moved to Bluffington, and their youngest child, 11-and-a-half-year-old Douglas Funny, is very nervous. But he's got his dog Porkchop to stick by him, a journal to write all his feelings in, and a new emerging friend circle, friends, bullies, neighbours, and a secret crush on the first girl he sees in this new town. With their help, he gets through all the turmoil within the crossroad between childhood and adolescence, and maybe we can learn something about ourselves along the way. That's about the gist of Doug. It's not a very complicated show. It was a pioneer in the slice-of-life genre of animation. Shows about unspectacular, everyday happenings, rarely any more surreal than a sitcom. And for what it's worth, it laid a strong foundation for shows like Arthur and Hey Arnold. In fact, I don't even think shows like SpongeBob or Courage would have been as good as they were If Doug didn't show audiences, there was a time for down-to-earth moments in cartoons.
Sun is out, the water is shimmering, scallops are chirping. So peaceful.
To be fair, the animated adaptations of Peanuts did a lot of this grunt work. You can see heavy Peanuts influence all over Doug, but this was the first time a world was built from the ground up to be an easygoing animated show. It showed the industry there was room to settle and let stories and characters breathe. What the industry also learned is that this could get very boring if there isn't some kind of hook. To be fair, Doug has a small hook: fantasy sequences. Doug is a very imaginative boy and a heavy daydreamer. Pretty much every time something happens to him, he has a dream that acts his emotions out in a more cartoonish manner, usually with alter egos like the superhero Quail Man, adventurer Race Canyon, or secret agent Smash Adams. These are some of the best parts of the show because they bring us away from a mundane issue and into what Doug's thinking. Doug as a character is otherwise a shy, literal-minded everyman. He isn't too quirky by himself, but he doesn't need to be. He's a good link between the audience and the world of Bluffington. Porkchop actively kept me interested in the show. He was that cute and lovable. He's a blatant Snoopy clone, but the more half-anthropomorphic cartoon dogs out there, the better, I say. Skeeter Valentine is Doug's best human friend who does best human friend things. Give support, go with him to places like the Honker Burger or the newest Beats concert. He's more in line with what Bluffington has to offer personality-wise. PATTI Mayonnaise is another friend who Doug has a not-so-very secret crush on, who's very nice, polite, and smart. Though this is how Doug sees her and writes about her in his journal. Later iterations of the character are less romanticized. I like her, but it takes a while for her to get interesting on her own. Roger Klotz is an older kid who picks on Doug. Nasty as he is, he adds some reality to the show, though I don't care for his stinky cat or one-dimensional cronies, even the one named Boomer. Other kids like BB, the spoiled rich daughter, Connie, a chubby yet kind-hearted girl, Fentruck, the foreign exchange student who's aged a lot better than I feared he would, and Chalky, the middle school's top dog and the single blandest character on the show, are okay secondary characters who have their uses but don't overtake the show. Doug's family is pretty mixed too. His parents have no importance in the first two seasons, then for the last two they're given very plain Jane hobbies and quirks. But it's not like they're active participants in their son's life, or that they need to be, I mean.
I'm leaving home, dropping out of school and starting a new life as a fugitive from justice.
That's nice, Doug. Just don't wake your sister.
That would be Judy, a bohemian performance artist who automatically has more life and energy than both her parents cloned 10 times combined. She's good for one scene of acting out or giving wisdom, but making stories around her was a little trickier it seems. But if you think the kids on this show are weird, wait until you see Mr. Dink, Doug's next-door neighbor who loves modern contraptions and very expensive luxuries. His name literally stands for double income, no kids. He and his snarky wife are fun side characters who maybe shouldn't be hanging around Doug so much, but he means him no harm, internet. The mayor of Bluffington is Mayor White. Very subtle, guys. A bit of a dunce who only really cares about winning the next election. This is a way too generous portrayal of politicians. But it's 1991, I didn't expect anything biting. Now for the middle school teachers worth talking about. I hate Vice Principal Mr. Bone with a burning passion. I hate how mean and bossy he is to every kid, no matter how well they behave. I hate his whiny voice that tries too hard to be commanding. I hate his ugly ginger-feltly mouth on his chin. I hate how not a single kid in the school brings human attention to his surname. It's so easy! I hate how apparently giving him a passion for yodeling was the only way they could make him quirky. I hate how there is a head principal, Mr. Butt Savage, that we never get to see, and how Mr. Boone struts around like he owns the place in his absence. And I hate, absolutely abhor, how most of this is rather effective, and he can sometimes work as an antagonist. Still, he made the show harder for me to watch. Doug's teacher, Miss Wingo, does make up for him. She's nice, encouraging, and all-around cheerful. A good role model for teachers. Last of all, the glue that holds the franchise together, the Sleech brothers, Al and Moo. The geeks who love computers and technology just as much as Mr. Dink loves expenses. They were later additions, but great at offering more esoteric, unconventional jokes and scenarios. These are the characters Doug is closest to, and it's a pretty colourful cast, no pun intended. The whole multicoloured skin thing is to show that it doesn't matter what colour someone's skin is, it's who they are as a character that counts first and foremost. It has no bearing on the writing, there aren't any episodes about racism, and I doubt Fred Newman's gonna get in trouble for blueface anytime soon. Doug is a very simple show, with very simple, easygoing stories where Doug has to learn something about trust or responsibility, among other virtues. Compared to the rest of the early 90s cultural landscape, which has been described by historians as edgy and countercultural, Doug is a far more idealized product. This feels like how 5-year-olds saw the 90s, not 11-year-olds. I don't think demographics were a big issue for the show, it doesn't try too hard to appeal to anyone in particular, it just wants to reflect a happier outlook of the times. But I mean, you could tell me it was made in the 70s and I'd believe you. It reaches for that funky culture too sometimes. The amusement park is literally called Funky Town. But about the music, as you can hear, it's mostly comprised of mouth sounds and a cappella, performed by Fred Newman, who also plays Skeeter, Porkchop, and Mr. Dink. It's a good, carefree soundtrack, though a little hard to talk over because who are you paying more attention to, me or the guy going rah 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 in the background? There are songs too, including many performed by The Beats, an American rock band with British accents, which makes total sense. Their songs are fine, nothing that deserves countless re-listens, but they can work in the context of certain episodes. Another thing very simple and charming is the animation. The colours are nice and vibrant, the designs are strange but mostly appealing, and the movement is fluid enough compared to the toy commercials it was facing off against. It's like seeing a preteen's doodles in motion, which is clearly the effect they were going for, even more so in the pilot where everything's all squiggly. Although this was toned down because it would have been harder to animate year-round. Maybe another Cartoon Network can pull it off eventually?
I don't want you to worry about me, but it looks like I might be going up the river for a while.
Doug, what are you talking about?
This is about the most chill, easygoing season of any television show I've ever seen in my life. There are toddler shows with more attitude than season 1 of Doug, but for one that's slowly meant to present you with how Doug's life goes and what sorts of shenanigans he gets into, it's not bad. As something to put on in the afternoons, a time where the target audience would need to settle down, rest, and maybe reflect on their day, early Doug episodes are good for that, I suppose.
Doug's my name and cool's my game. I got a lot of cool to give and I need the same. So if you like my style and you want to talk a while, just call me.
Doug.
Firmly in the 90s now, Season 2 cleaned the animation up. Indeed, some Spumco artists had to work on Doug this year while Ren and Stimpy's production was shaken up, and individual characters like Patti and BB were a little more developed and given more things to do on their own. Doug as a character didn't change much, but the writers wanted to take him to more places like a ballet or a derby, to see how he and his friends would fare there. Fentruck was also introduced in this run, so the Yakistonians now have a member of the cast to call their own.
Say, quite a nice setup you got here, Douglas. Wow!
I noticed some changes in the air in Season 3, and they weren't good. The optimism was dimmed a little, with more friendship and grave-threatening conflicts coming Doug's way, and more Mr. Bone because that's what was needed. It gives the season a grumpier feeling than the others, even if it's still got mostly good morals and resolutions. It's like someone at Nick wanted the show to get more mature and reflect the times, without understanding what makes Doug work to a degree, the lightheartedness. They did manage to bounce back with Season 4.
There's a bomb in the lasagna?
A bomb in the lasagna? Great Scott!
This, that we just saw was a dank meme.
It's like the show finished its growing pains and learned how to be more emotionally realistic. Whatever was left to do with them, they did it. He went on a date with Patti, celebrated Halloween and Christmas, graduated middle school, and helped Mrs. Dink win a mayoral election. It was a busy time to have the first name Doug and the last name Funny, but still a bad time to have the first name Doug in real life, because the show would continue to exist in some form or another for a long time to come. But in the meantime, I thought I'd reflect on 12 of my favourite episodes from this original 4-season run. Doug's bum rap used Chalky in a more convincing way than usual, making Doug suspicious of his seeming perfection when it becomes clear he's ignoring him after cheating off his test. Not an amazing use with an amazing reveal for any other character, but this is chalky. The bare minimum is a blessing here. Doug's Christmas story takes the holiday in a darker direction, with Porkchop getting accused of attacking BB and ending up on death row. It has its critics. This is probably not what you want playing in the back of a Christmas party, but I applaud Doug of all shows for pushing the angle of being grateful for your loved ones. Doug and the Weird Kids is the one where Doug meets the Sleech brothers, and you're just as interested in their odd dialogue and mannerisms, and you both get a good answer. Doug Out in Left Field is the Pee-wee baseball story to end all Pee-wee baseball stories, right before sports movies came back in full swing. Seeing Patti form her own unisex team is gleeful, and thrilling to see for some girls back then, I'm sure. Doug Tips the Scales is a very simple, relatable tale of how kids see childhood obesity, adding in stuff about body image, weight loss, and not overdoing it. But it's not too grim, it doesn't deal with anorexia or anything. Doug's Nightmare on Jumbo Street is even scarier than Doug Has His Name in Every Title deal with it, approaching a child's view of horror movies, or rather, lack of view, since Doug closes his eyes at the scary part, leaving him with a more nightmarish vision of the movie than what actually appears. Doug's Lucky Hat is a well-labeled tin. Doug finds a hat that grants the wearer all the good luck in the world. I love stories like this because it's probably just superstition in this world too, and Doug just had a real hot streak of luck before it was Roger's turn, and that's nice. Doug's big nose is up here because of the fantasy sequences. On the face of it, it's a pretty average early episode, but just how absurd Doug's vanity issues are is really funny. Not always for the intended reasons, but still. Doug's big catch shows some growth in the Douglas and Dink relationship when Doug goes on a fishing trip to catch a Moby Dick-like troublemaker. This won't be the last of the mysteries surrounding underwater menaces, I can say that much. The top 3 are all Doug and Patti episodes predictably enough, starting with Doug's magic act. They're cuffed together by a failed magic trick, showing them how it isn't all too great being unable to leave someone you like for several hours. First Hurdle of Marriage, brought to you by Nickelodeon. Doug's secret song is so fascinating for someone of my age to see. Doug, Patti, and Mr. Bone all go to a music video booth, but their videotapes are all switched. Never mind the perplexing mysteries of these videotapes. I want to go to one of these, they seemed like fun, and really made me realize this was the quintessential time period for Doug to come out. My favourite episode was Doug and Patti sitting in a tree, where the two go on a quote-unquote date, so Doug has to learn how to prepare for one. It's helpful, adorable, and tries its best to make Doug a more sophisticated show with bigger, better lessons about relationships. It wasn't always like that, however. Here are 8 episodes that were mediocre or outright clunkers. Doug's new teacher has the kind of story I didn't want to see, Roger tricking a substitute teacher into thinking Doug's the menace. Things do turn around with a bit of luck, but those first 2 acts of misunderstandings were rather sad. Doug's big news is a Mr. Bone episode. What else do I need to say? That the way Roger ruins the news in the classroom thing is selfish and things could have worked differently, I suppose. Doug's babysitter, for one, is a cow who doesn't seem to understand how to take care of children, only make them miserable. But they give her a happy ending for some reason, when Doug and Judy hook her up with Mr. Bone. Be nice, employee Emilian. Chill out. You can get through this. Doug Didn't Do It is an episode that exists. It's an early one where not a lot engaging happens. Roger frames Doug for a prank, then accidentally admits to this over the intercom. This would be 1 or 2 scenes in a later season, not a whole story. Doug is slave for a day, involves Judy blackmailing and slave driving her little Dougie, and he is depressingly submissive about it. I don't usually agree with people when they think Doug is an unlikable idiot, unless they're talking about Doug's math problem, where he somehow gets himself in a lot of danger trying to get a letter open, one he doesn't want his parents to read because he's having issues with maths at school. I was left annoyed by this one more than anything. Doug's cartoon is just the newscast episode again. Doug draws a cartoon for the school paper that Mr. Bone takes offense to, starting this whole war between censorship and free speech, which this show doesn't really have the right tools to carve something out of. But worst of all is Doug's shock therapy. After shock therapy, Mr. Bone mistakes Doug's skateboard for a gift while he's visiting, and turns back into a kid at heart, annoying everyone. I really don't care about the question of whether Mr. Bone is better off this way, because hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think he's a great character. I hope you understood what I liked about Nickelodeon's run of Doug episodes through all this, but the show must go on, even if it has to move to a different corporation and a different network. Goodbye for now.
Doug is just a normal kid. Mostly.
We have a city to rescue!
Doug is coming at you next, right here on ABC.